With Dynasty still in full swing, it's time to figure out who you're going to buy, who you're going to hold, and who you're going to sell if you're a contender in today's league. All that and more on Operation Domination.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
Chris
Already
Dowhouse,
hearing about these are pointless in fantasy in the sense
and
that
Adam
not
LaRue.
freak out.
Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
Well, all right. Welcome back in to Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app. And you can always check us out on the Fantasy Football Advice YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader, joined here with Chris D, Adam LaRue, and Chase Thornton, the full crew once again in the building. And we had a long conversation about how we were going to approach the next couple of weeks. And I think we came up with some good answers for you guys, the listeners and viewers. We're going to take a perspective from a contender in today's episode. Who should you buy? Who should you hold? Who should you sell? And then next week, we'll come back if you're in a rebuild mode. So that way we can kind of comb through these guys and what their values actually should be. So Adam, how do you know if you're a contender or a rebuilder?
Yeah, I think the process is different for, and it's been a while since I've said that word.
Take a shot.
There it is. I think it's different for everyone. For me, I like to, around this time of year, right before the draft, look through all of my teams and kind of gauge. I like to see outside sources. There's, you can put into rankings and trade calculators, and there's sites like Dynasty Daddy, for example, that can aggregate like within your league. Are you like, where do they think you are? And then you have to use your own intuition to, double check that. Do I think I'm a contender? Do I think I'm in the bottom half? Sometimes you're going to disagree, but it's good to get, an outside perspective sometimes on what, based on values and based on other people's thoughts, what you might be and what you think you are. So I like to go through around this time of year and put together lists of players who I'd buy as a contender, who I'd sell as a contender, who I'd buy as a rebuild, who I'd sell as a rebuild, and try to figure out which of my teams fall into which category so that I can, throughout the offseason, throughout the season, make moves towards that. But Dan, I want to kick it to you first. What are your key signs? What makes your team a contender, do you think?
When you're scoring more points than the other team. No, I'm just kidding. It's obviously the very, very simple answer there. The things I'm looking for, do you have a strong core that's in the early to middle part of their prime years in age? So like for a running back, are you somewhere between 24 and 27? A wide receiver, are you somewhere between 25 and 29? Like you're looking for kind of those ranges. Obviously tight ends and quarterbacks get extended out a little bit more than that, but do you have a strong core with some depth, maybe some assets, some flexibility around that to be able to make moves? Because that's the big, you have to be able to make moves to go for key positions that you don't have in order to actually go for that championship run. So do you have a core, and do you have depth and flexibility around that to address maybe a weakness or two? And if you have those things, then you should have a 2 to 3 opportunity window. That to me is what I'm looking for if I'm a contender.
I like that answer. Chase, I want to ask you this one. Say you think you're a contender. What are maybe some pitfalls people could fall into where they think they're a contender but they're really not? Whether that's you think you're coming out of a rebuild and maybe you try to start buying older players too early when you're not quite there yet, or your players fall off the cliff when you get into the season. How do you avoid those things, or do you try to avoid those things?
No, I definitely try to avoid them. What you don't want to get caught in is that feedback loop where you never see yourself as a contender. But like you said, if you jump the gun and you think you're a contender, you can set yourself back a whole heck of a lot more. I like Dan's answer about making sure that you've got that young core. You want to make sure that your foundation is solid for years going forward. But if you take a look at your roster and you think you're stronger than you are, you might think that you might love your wide receivers. You might think that they're great. You might love your quarterbacks. You might think you got a good tight end. And you might think, well, all I got to do is buy a couple of running backs. You've got to make sure, like Dan said, you've got the capital to do that. If you don't have the deep enough roster to be able to withstand bye weeks and injuries, just like in redraft, if your roster isn't strong enough to do that, you should not be trading away, for to bring, one position in to try and snag some old running backs, some Saquon Barkley types, and go for it. You need to make sure that you have built that foundation solidly. Likewise, I always say I'm in Superflex leagues, in my Dynasty leagues. You need to make sure that you are set at the quarterback position, that one injury to one of your quarterbacks isn't going to completely tank you. Those are just a couple of things that you need to make sure you're looking for, so that you don't jump the gun early. Because if you start giving stuff away and then you come out 5th, 6th, 7th place and you're not a contender and you've sold off all your assets, it's going to be a long haul for you.
That is a tough place to be. But if you end up there, especially say your core ages out, right? Like you've been a contender and it's falling off the cliff, right? Because that's maybe a bit more of going too early. But Chris, say you fall off the cliff. When do you make that, like, all right, now I need to transition out of being a contender? Like how do you make that call? Like is it mid-season? Is that an off-season thing for you? And what are kind of your signs there that, like, all right, it's time to start selling some of these older guys?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, Adam, I think it's hard to figure out if you're a contender, especially after last year, where there's kind of a lot of teams went into the season not thinking they were contenders, and teams did think they were contenders, and you had a lot of injuries. You had a lot of guys kind of surprised. And that's where I think depth is so important. That really, to me, determines where you really are as a contender. What kind of quality depth? Dan hit it on the head with you have a core. That's great. But, as Chase was kind of alluded to, the core can only get you so far in my book. You're going to need guys you can bring off the bench. And if you don't have players that you can move or flex in or bring off the bench to substitute your roster, then you really aren't a contender in my book. And what I think you need to do, Adam, is you kind of turned me on to this over the years of, once you realize you're kind of out, sell as fast as you can. I don't think you hold on very long. I think that once you realize, hey, this isn't the season for me, you try to get as many assets as you can. You try to capitalize people making their playoff runs, and you try to sell what you can, kind of scrounge, whether it's your older players or guys for future, try to get yourself some picks. I think it's something that as soon as you kind of recognize, hey, I'm not a true contender, whether that's week 4 or that's middle of the season, you're going to kind of have a good adjustment of what other guys are doing. And if you realize like this isn't going to be my year, I think you try to get out as quickly as possible and try to cash in your, some of the assets. I don't think you sell everything, Adam, but I do think it's important to make sure that, the guys that you're going to carry forward for next year or two, try to get something for them if you can.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Of course, you said that part of that was inspired by me, so that, of course, I'm going to agree, right? But I think part of that does stand in the, look, there's going to be players that you keep because maybe they are still young, and there's going to be players you keep because maybe they are still, like, you can sell them, you can still, like, build around them, like, you have options. There's a lot of players who, like, that might be your last window to sell, and it's going to be a lot easier to move that 3rd round pick in the offseason than that player. You look at Jordan Mason, who we talked about last week that we really liked. There was a good sell window during the season, and maybe we get another one. We talked about that again last weekend, but there was a really good sell window, and there's no guarantee you get that back. There's definitely a moment of deciding when to sell and when not to. That can be really a game changer to getting through that rebuild as fast as possible, because you don't want to be spending buy-ins and not winning. You want to keep that time as short as possible. But all right, I think that can kick us into our first group. Chase, I think you put it very well there. We're building around the quarterbacks. Rebuild or not, quarterback is where it lives. This is where Superflex Dynasty lives. So we're going to start off, and we're going to kind of assume here that these are going to be your QB2 types, but I think some really interesting, especially at cost, QB2 value options here. So I'm curious what you guys are going to pick. So that's Jared Goff, who is the QB 20 in aggregate value based on startup drafts on Sleeper. Okay. That's what we're going to use for the entire episode. So just when I say QB 20, his ADP is the QB 20 on Sleeper drafts functionally. Okay. Dak Prescott, QB 22 and Justin Fields as the QB 23. So, gentlemen, I'm going to start with you, Dan. For this first one, we're going to go left to right. Out of that group, who are you buying, who are you selling, and who are you holding?
Well, you did a really good job of picking quarterbacks that are like literally right next to each other. So, applaud by you to make this a real interesting conversation. I'm going to sell Jared Goff. I'm going to buy Dak Prescott, and I'm going to hold Justin Fields. That's ultimately where I landed here. So with Jared Goff, he's in a situation where his value has a pathway to me more so than the other two of a clear trajectory down. And his value might be as high as it could possibly be, right? They have a whole new, outside of Dan Campbell, this is pretty much a whole new coaching staff for the Detroit Lions. We talked about this. I have a lot of questions about Johnny Morton, who was only a play caller in the NFL once in his entire career back in 2017 with the New York Jets, when granted, they didn't have a lot of talent, but it was less than thrilling talking about a team that was 28th in yards, 24th in points, 25th in pass attempts, like just bottom tier. And now Jared Goff's going to be in a situation. Now, there's a lot of talent still, and Dan Campbell's still there. So I think a lot of people would look at Jared Goff and say, well, guess what? He's finished as a top 10 quarterback the last 3 years in a row. So there's value there that they would want to have, especially if you're in a situation where he's your QB2 for Superflex leagues, right? And then I look at his value and what's the range that some things are going for him right now. Like, he's in the same range as a Kenneth Walker, as a first round in 2026 or 2027, as a Chase Brown, as a Tyler Warren. Like, those level of players right now in the same spot as Jared Goff, if I can get anything like that back for him, I'm much more willing to sell a guy that I think there is some question marks about what the future truly holds for his value. Dak Prescott is just the flip side of that, right? I want to buy him. He's only 2 years removed from a top 5 quarterback performance in points per game, coming off the injury last year. Nobody likes Brian Schottenheimer as the head coach or play caller, but they did just add George Pickens. They still have CD Lamb. This still has to be a pass-first offense because it's the crepitancy of the running back position that we have going on right now. So there's all those things that kind of gets molted in where Dak should be in a situation where he's getting high volume and has more weapons. And he's a guy we've seen produce as a high-end fantasy football quarterback before. And he's kind of more in the range of those low-end RB2, mid-level wide receiver 3 type of players. That's something I'm willing to give up to go get Dak Prescott, especially if we're talking about him as our QB2, which he's ranked as QB22 consensusly in Dynasty leagues. And then why am I holding Justin Fields? Well, I don't think you can sell him too high because he only has a 2-year contract on the Jets. It's not going to be a high octane offense. And while people are going to love his rushing ability, I don't necessarily think people are going to look at it like salivating, like, yeah, I want to get Justin Fields on my team in case he pops. We've seen enough of him at this point where you can't really project him for more than what he is. But what he is actually pretty good. He's been a top 12 quarterback at least every single year that he's been a starter, including last season when he was QB7 first 6 weeks as a starter. So I think you hold him because I'm not going to buy him for what you'd have to give up in his price range right now, which is amongst those high-end wide receiver 3s, maybe the aging low-end RB2s. I don't know if I necessarily want to give that up in that territory, but I'm going to get more value out of him than that. But I also don't think you're going to sell him for quite a bit either. So this is a guy I'm just going to hold on to and enjoy the ride while I can. So that's why I went with those options for those players.
I like it a lot. I think mine will look pretty similar, but that'd be skipping a little bit. Chris, what do you got? You in the same boat, or do you have it a little differently?
I'm a little bit different, and this is a little tough for me. So my first I'm going to be buying is Justin Fields. I'm going to be selling Jared Goff, and I'm going to be holding Dak Prescott. And Jared Goff's one of the tough ones for me in the sense where every year we underrate Jared Goff, and he winds up finishing better than we expect. He was always a top 15 quarterback the last couple of years. A guy who's criminally underrated year in, year out, and winds up overachieving. The problem, Adam, is, as you kind of alluded to, he's still QB 20. And as a result, his value never goes up when he has great years and the statistics go great. So he has nowhere to go but down, and he's not going to rise anymore. So for me, this is a guy I'm going to get what I'm going to get for Jared Goff at this point. So to me, he's a sell. The buy, Justin Fields. The reason that Dan, hit a nail on the head for me for Justin Fields, it's the upside I'm looking for. If I'm a true contender, and at this price tag, I can get him for a receiver 3 or an RB2, I am absolutely pulling the trigger on that. Number one, he's the youngest of the group. So there is still some upside here that I can maybe capitalize. It might only be a 2-year deal, but I have a guy that maybe has a good year that I could flip in the future, or have, another couple years that I could hold on to this guy. So I like the young part, but also the price tag, like I said, for a guy who has a rushing talent, who finishes top 11, who is a guy who hasn't even necessarily been in position to succeed yet. Like, even in Pittsburgh, he was basically asked last year not to lose the games, and was still one of the top, quarterbacks when he actually finished the games and played. And he wasn't lighting the world on fire by any stretch of the means. You see this Jets offense is designed for him. This is going to be utilization of Justin Fields' legs. He's going to have simple reads, and he's going to have a lot of easy tight end to go to, or number one receiver to go to. Last time we saw that in Chicago, it worked out pretty well fantasy-wise. So I like that a lot. And then for me, as Dan kind of talked about, Dak Prescott is a tempting buy, because I know the price is lowest can kind of be in the sense with him. I like the weapons. People could talk about Schottenheimer all they want. This isn't his dad. This is going to be a pass-first team. Don't get it twisted when it comes to Dallas. And with weapons they have in place, and the running backs, especially with Jeudy Blue as well, you have a lot of guys that can catch the ball out of the backfield. They are trying to make Dak Prescott their franchise. They paid him a lot of freaking money moving forward. So they're going to give him every opportunity to kind of earn that money, in my opinion. And that's a guy to me that you want to hold on to, or as Dan kind of to buy, because I think Dak Prescott, the value that you can get him for, or you can try to move him for right now, isn't worth it to move him, but it's definitely worth a guy that I'm holding on to down, for this season as a contender, or like I said, trying to buy like Dan did.
I agree with you, and I agree with you so much that I'm gonna echo pretty much exactly what you said there. Look, I am also going to buy for Contender Justin Fields. I'm going to sell Jared Goff, and I'm going to hold Dak Prescott. I think for me, the reason I want to go Justin Fields is that short window of rushing upside is just too tempting for me to pass up. I think of these guys look, if you told me that Jared Goff or Dak Prescott, were somewhere between QB 10 and QB 14, I wouldn't be shocked. But for any of them to break higher than that, I think it's really only Justin Fields, unless Dak just completely goes bonkers. And it's just the rushing upside. So for that reason, as a contender, and being a guy who is, you get that little added bonus of his age, where, maybe you get longer, but even just I think over the next 2 years, he's the one that gets the most points. So for me as a contender, that's the route that I want to go to. But
I like the floor too, Adam. We talked about his upside. The floor is also good with the rushing. I think that's really encouraging, that you look at guys like Daniel Jones when he has a good year. Those numbers don't have to be ridiculous for him to rush, and he's capable of it. But he's rushed for 500 yards and still be somebody that you can feel confident having in your lineup.
No, exactly. I mean, to that point, in 2022, he had one of the worst passing seasons of all time. At least probably the worst passing season of all time of any quarterback that threw more touchdowns than interceptions. I'd be hard pressed to find a worse passing season where the quarterback wasn't just throwing picks all over the place. But he's gotten better, and not that he's great, but he's gotten a lot better to where you can be an okay passer and a damn good runner, and that can make for some really impactful scoring in Superflex and fantasy, especially if you're talking about your QB2. He could easily be the type of player that gives you 2 QB2s at a low price point. So for me, it's going to be Justin Fields. Dak, I mean, I'm right there with you guys on Schottenheimer and the pass volume. I don't know that it's going to be the most exciting pass attack in the world, but they're going to throw quite a bit. And Dak is one who, when you've given him a bunch of volume, he's normally delivered for you. So he's going to be my 2. And Goff just kind of, I feel bad because there's just more questions with him, and he's the most expensive guy, just based on the coaching staff. Again, he's the most expensive guy, and I don't know. It's just weird with him. He's one of those guys that has benefited from being largely inside the last couple of years. The schedule has, I mean, it's not as great as it was the last couple of years. It's still pretty good. He's spending most of the time inside, but it's just these little things when these guys are grouped so tight. But Chase, bring us home. How do you group these guys?
Well, if I'm a contender, like I said, and since I'm in super flexes, I'm going to be a lot more reticent to let go of any of these guys. I'm going to actively buy Justin Fields, and I'm going to actively buy Dak Prescott if I can. Again, Justin Fields, we know the rushing upside. We've seen it. When he's a starter, when he gets to play, good things can happen for you fantasy-wise. I don't care what happens on the field necessarily, but fantasy-wise, Justin Fields can be a money quarterback for you. And I like the fact that, like we've talked about, he ranks third in this group. You might be able to get somebody, whoever has him, you might be able to talk that person into giving him to you at a little bit of cost right now, if you can hammer on the idea that, well, he didn't start last year and everything else that's going on there. Plus it's the Jets. You can always pull that card out of your back pocket. Dak Prescott, however, we talked kind of a little bit last week about how Lamb and Pickens, after the Pickens trade, they complement each other. We think they're going to complement each other really well on the field there. He still has Ferguson at the tight end position. We talked about Jadon Blue that they just drafted. Plus they brought in the other running backs there, Javonte Williams, who can catch the ball if they want to throw it to him. Miles Sanders, who has had that kind of a role before as a dual threat running back. So there will be opportunities for him to throw the ball to the backs as well. I like the weapons that he's surrounded with. They took measures to upgrade their offensive line, should protect him, try and keep him healthy, because when he has been healthy the last several years, he's been good. And I like that idea there. I'm going to be holding Jared Goff. And if it looks early on, if I feel like I'm okay with the rest of my quarterback room, he would be the one of these three that I could be moved to sell, because he's the most expensive, because I think you can get the most back for him if you're selling him off to somebody that, who you like the return from there. But, Jared Goff, he's still surrounded by all those weapons. He's still got Amon-Ra St. Brown. He still has Jameson Williams. Now he has Isaac Tesla, who I think we all kind of liked, Laporta. And then again, the running game there. There's questions with the coaching staff, but until I see last year's QB6 completely fall on his face, I don't necessarily want to give him away for peanuts if I'm a contender, because I want to make sure that I have two good starting quarterbacks every single week and I'm not locked into a corner there. I'm going to actively buy Fields and Prescott. I'm going to hold Jared Goff. He'd be the one of the three I might be moved to sell.
If you're forced to rank between Fields and Dak, which would you go ahead of the other?
Yeah, if I'm forced to keep one or the other, or
your head,
purchase one or the other.
Yeah. If you are forced to do one of each, which would you go? Now, and to be clear, I would probably also be willing to buy both Fields and Dak at the right cost. But your leagues, Goff might be a buy. If I'm real confident in my contender status, I'd probably try and buy Prescott first. All right.
If I'm not as comfortable, we've talked about it, Justin Fields is still a young man, even for a quarterback, even for a pro football player, still young enough that would be a real nice one. Plus, there's still the possibility, like Chris brought up, if you want to be a contender, take some risks and shoot for the moon. Fields is the one who's going to get you those gigantic numbers because of the rushing totals. So,
yeah, no, so we go 2-2. We functionally just switch on Dak and Justin Fields, and we're all.
Goff, you are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Yeah, and that again, it doesn't necessarily mean that in your leagues, Goff is not a buy as a contender, but. If pitted between the three, that for me, my priority order, if I'm a contender, I'd probably try to buy Justin first, then Dak, then Goff. And in your league, that might be different. And for Chase and for Dan, that they're going to switch, Dak and Justin there.
And even if you're selling Goff, you're not giving him away. You need to make sure that you are. I mean, yeah, we want to get a great price if we're buying him, but you are not giving Jared Goff away. Because he can still help you. He was a top 10 quarterback last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And now the most important position for contender status. I'd say quarterback is the most important position in Dynasty in general. But what really separates a rebuild from a contender is the running backs, right? You doing running backs last most of the time in your Dynasty build. So looking at our running back group, we have Josh Jacobs, who is the RB12, ranked 49th player. We have James Cook right behind him in both at RB13 and the 50th player. And then a little bit lagging behind them, and a guy who I'm surprised is still evaluated after the draft the same way that he is Chase Brown, who is at the RB 17 and rank 61. So a good 11, 12 spots behind those guys. Chris, I'm going to go to you this time. How do you go as far as this trio?
Yeah, so I'm going to be buying Chase Brown. I'm going to be selling Josh Jacobs. I'm going to be holding James Cook. For me, look, I know that it's concerned about Chase Brown, but the upside we talked about is so much there. We saw it last year. This can be your Kyren Williams in a sense. And similar to Kyren Williams, where we wrote him off last year going into the season, we all assumed Blake Corum's going to come in and steal some of his touches and it's going to affect him, and it didn't. We all assumed that somehow, there's going to be touches taken from Chase Brown. There can be, Adam, but with this offense being so prolific and having the receiver core that it has, he's going to be able to have easy yards for him. He's still on the younger side, still upside to go for him, and a guy whose price tag isn't too high for me. So I look at Chase Brown as a guy that if you're a contender, you can spend the money, you have the upside you're looking for, but you also have one of those potent offenses you're getting a piece of as well. Then I look at Jacobs as a sell. The reason Jacobs for me is a sell is that I think last year is pretty much the best year you're going to get out of Josh Jacobs. I think that we saw the touches, a lot of touches last year, and we've also seen seasons where Josh Jacobs has a good year and then sucks the following year. Has a good year, then sucks the following year. Well, we're due for the sucking year. And I feel like you have a guy who's at RB12. It's just a guy that I'm not paying the price tag for, and a guy who I think that if you can maximize your profits for him right now, he's not going to be any higher in my book because you're going to see some of the other backs start putting touches. You've seen that more receivers get added to the well, and you also see some guys like a Reed, it's like a Savion Williams who can even steal some touches out of the backfield as well. So I look at a guy whose value I think is as high as it's going to go, and I'm not willing to buy that. And I'm definitely not willing to necessarily hold on to it and watch it deteriorate down the road for me. Finally, I look at, Cook. Cook's really tough because I look at, you're concerned with this year as a contender. Is he going to hold out this season? Is he going to, be a guy who's going to be kind of phased out throughout the season? But I think that we all agree Buffalo wants to be a contender. They're going to be playing to win. And James Cook, by far, is their best back. I like Ray Davis. I like Ty Johnson. I like some different guys they have in the backfield. James Cook has a special ability. He can turn the corner better than most guys can. He has that Gibbs skill set where there's not a lot of guys who can kind of maximize the edge the way he does. The touchdowns were added bonus last year in a sense. I don't think you can expect that again. But what you have is a guy that you don't want to sell low on. You don't want to have a guy who's still in his prime in a sense, but a guy that you kind of are cautious because you want to kind of maybe take some offers, possibly if people are willing to buy him, because you don't know what his long term is going to be for Buffalo. If he doesn't get re-signed there, if he moves on, what kind of free agent market is going to be him, and will he ever be an RB1 anywhere else? So he's the guy that I think that you want to hold on to because I think ultimately, even if he holds out at the beginning of the season, he has to play to get his money to move forward, and Buffalo is going to be a contender. So you're going to have him for that playoff stretch. So he's a guy that I'm holding on to as a contender.
Yeah, I don't disagree too much. I'm going to have two players switched. But Chase, we're going to go back to you quick. How do you have these guys grouped?
Well, if I'm contending, I understand Chris's point because it's nothing that I haven't said on air before, and it's nothing we haven't talked about in the past. The point about Josh Jacobs being like an every other year good and sucking, if he plays 17 games, if he plays the full season, if he doesn't miss time, he's good. He's good fantasy-wise. He missed time 2 years ago. He missed time 4 years ago. When he plays a full season, this is a guy who almost averages 15 half PPR points for a game in his career. Regardless of playing time, he averages almost 15 half PPR points. That's pretty good. That's low-end RB1 numbers, high-end RB2 numbers in terms of on the season, if you can average that. I like that. So if I'm a contender, if I can buy Jacobs, if I can get him, because when you're in a rebuild, that's the last position that you kind of bring in. That's the final piece to the puzzle. That's the cherry on top of the sundae, is the running back position. Typically, because when we're in rebuilds, we're trying to get these quarterbacks, these receivers that have that longer lifespan in terms of their playing time, in terms of their age. An older running back as long as you get the guy that's in the right position, the right situation, that's the kind of guy that can push you over the top. And Josh Jacobs, with the way that the Packers used him last year, with the way that he can still run the football, with how integral he is to that offense, and I think he's still going to be to that offense, Josh Jacobs is a guy I wouldn't mind buying if I'm a contender. James Cook, likewise, is a guy that I'm holding to buying if I'm contending. Of these three guys, James Cook was the one who had the most blow-up games last year. He had 4 games over 25 half PPR points. Chase Brown didn't have a single game of over 25 half PPR points. He was kind of the steady Eddie of things. He was much better over the second half of the season, Chase Brown was. But James Cook, he's not going to score 18 touchdowns again. We all know that. But he is still, like we said before, like Chris said, he's going to be an integral part of that offense. He's by far the best back, the most complete back on that roster. He gives them the best chance to win, handing him the football and taking some of the pressure off of Josh Allen so that Josh Allen doesn't have to get pounded all the time. So he doesn't have to throw the ball to his group of middling receivers. And then when it comes to Chase Brown, I'm not selling him by any means because of the age and because, like I said, he was better over the second half of last season. I'm not necessarily actively buying Chase Brown, but I am definitely going to hold Chase Brown because if you were one of the lucky people who were rebuilding and could get Chase Brown cheap, he finally is coming into his own right now where he is usable as a piece on a contender. So I am buying Jacobs if I'm a contender. I am buying to holding Cook, and I am at least holding Chase Brown.
Okay. I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to agree with Chris on the buying of Chase Brown, but I'm going to flip the other two as my second piece, who I would probably also buy, but we're going to, for the sake of this, call it a hold, Josh Jacobs, and again, for the sake of this, calling it a sell on James Cook. And my reason for that differentiation on those first two, because I agree with what Chris said on Chase Brown. My differentiation on those back two is Josh Jacobs is just a volume hog. I mean, his lowest season in terms of attempts was still more than James Cook last year in his best fantasy season. James Cook actually went backwards in both carries and targets. He just had an incredible year touchdown-wise. Which he had gone 2 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, and then 16 rushing touchdowns. So to me, I expect the rushing touchdowns to average out some kind of way a little bit lower. And then if you're still a sub 40 target guy and a sub 210 carry guy, like it's just hard for me to believe that you're recouping RB13 value from a dynasty perspective. Whereas Josh Jacobs is a guy who has a handful of times in his career now been a 300 attempt guy. He finally got involved in the passing game a little bit more, and is someone who, kind of to Chase's point, when healthy, he's the guy. And I'm just kind of willing to ride that out. Their values are close enough as well that I think just given the volume, I'm willing to be a little bit more bullish. But at cost, I think Chase Brown's a buy all day long, being a little bit cheaper than these other guys. I think he's really explosive and a really good offense, and I've said it a billion times over the last couple of years in this show. Like, at the end of the day, you want running backs and good offenses in fantasy. Like, unless they're a truly transcendent talent, like a good running back on a bad team is a bad fantasy asset. Like, a great running back can still be good on a bad team, but it hurts you quite a bit. So Chase Brown being on one of the great offenses, and not that the Bills aren't as well a great offense, but yeah, Chase Brown's in a hell of a situation, and a great receiver, which helps quite a bit too. Dan, finish us off. What do we got?
All right. Well, so I got Josh Jacobs the hold, James Cook as a sell, and Chase Brown as a buy. And I'll get the obvious with Chase Brown out of the way, because you guys have kind of echoed some of the same points that, I was going to make, or we have even made post-draft when we've talked about Chase Brown already a couple episodes here. If you weren't listening, go back, listen to Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app. But they signed decrepit Samaje Perine. They bring back the ghost of Zach Moss. They spent 6th-round capital on Taj Brooks. All that leads to Chase Brown, who had an 83% share on the ground, 13% target share, Maybe he doesn't get that again to those heights, but it does indicate to me that this is a real chance he's going to get a bell cow level workload yet again due to the lack of talent or a lack of pushing of touches behind him on that depth chart. So that's the obvious part, right? The other part to think about is this. He's still on his rookie deal for 2 more years. The Bengals have a lot of holes everywhere else. Running back is not going to be a priority to them the rest of this season and probably even next year too. So you might get really great capital out of an explosive player on an explosive offense with a lot of scoring opportunities for 2 years on his rookie deal. And then whether it's the Bengals who sign him or if he winds up going somewhere else, you'll be able to sell him then. So he's a buy now and an asset later. It makes him a perfect buy to me in my book. I'm selling James Cook. He had his best season last year. He ain't getting 18 touchdowns again total. It's just not going to happen. This is a guy who had 3 his rookie season total and 6 in his sophomore year, and then he catapulted to 18. Now he's holding out. Now, I don't think he can afford to hold out in any kind of length of time, and I don't think this is a Le'Veon Bell situation. I think that was a warning shot to anybody who ever thought about doing that again. But he's not a type of guy who I want to see lose any conditioning if this goes into training camp because he relies on that conditioning. He relies on that speed to be able to make plays. He's not going to be a grinded out type of player. He has to be efficient. Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, they're still going to be involved here. And if they don't want to pay James Cook and he's hell-bent on being paid, well, then he might only be on Buffalo for 1 more season. Who knows what happens to his situation off of that? I think his value is as high as it can be right now because I think you know what you're going to get out of him this season. If somebody else is a contender, I want to sell him off right now. Future first-round picks are on the table at his value. Even other low-end RB1s are in the same trade value as a James Cook. I'm willing to take anything in that range for him to move off now. And then I get to Josh Jacobs. Why is Jacobs a hold to me? Well, I think he hits that perfect sweet spot where I don't necessarily want to buy him for the value he costs, but I don't want to sell him off for that value either. It's unilateral either way. Jacobs is still 27, so he has 2 more prime running back years just going off the usual parameters, 27 and 28. So you have 2 years of prime football left in him. While he had a really good season last year, the Packers offense as a whole disappointed. There is an argument to be made that if they're better as an offensive unit, there'll be even more scoring opportunities, so at least be able to maintain the scoring opportunities that he had last season, which made him an RB5 overall. You guys talked about, he's good one season, bad the other. Well, those bad seasons, he's still RB20 on a points per game basis. Those bad seasons because he was injured, not because necessarily the production was killing you. He's still a starting running back. Maybe not the RB1 level that you hope for when you get a Josh Jacobs, but still a starting level who's not killing your lineup. So either way, it's a unilateral decision if I try to move him or get him. But he's a sweet spot value pick if I'm a contender right now who has a 2-year window and is good whenever he's on the field, regardless of a high floor. So I'm holding Josh Jacobs for that reason.
Hey, Dan, if you're a contender that's holding on, that has Cook, and the Jacobs owner is selling, would you consider that straight up or no?
It's about even. That would be another unilateral situation right now. And right now, James Cook is actually, his value is a little bit higher.
A little bit higher.
It's a little bit higher, just enough where I can get those first rounders or those high-end wide receiver 2s, low-end RB1s that I was talking about there. So I would probably look for something else like Josh Jacobs, but I think their value dynasty-wise is pretty even right now.
We went back to back to back having them flip. So, Chris, if I can give you a minute on the clock, I do want to hear what, if you want to, after hearing everyone else, if you want to defend James Cook over Jacobs there.
No, I think for myself, it's just real simple. Like I get everybody's point of view, but I think Jacobson is a guy that I'm more concerned with the usage that he got last year. Green Bay typically does like to use multiple running backs. Last year's usage was kind of odd. Isn't a guy who's usually heavily involved in the passing attack. Is a guy who's going to be going older. And Adam, you talked about 4 years we had over 300 touches. That usually starts wearing on some of these guys where they start getting nicked up. We saw guys last year, the older running backs get nicked up through the season. One of the things I'm concerned about a contender is when I have an older running back who has a guy that's going to deter my season in a sense. If I'm banking on Josh Jacobs and he goes down week 4, it could definitely sabotage me. Where I feel like a James Cook, some of the other guys, I'm going to be waiting for the playoffs. I'm going to be waiting to have them, but I like the upside. I like the talent more long term. But I definitely agree with Dan. I can understand if it's definitely debatable. It's definitely a struggle because Jacobs seems like money in the bank in a sense. But I also feel like there's a lot of different things happening in Green Bay that makes me kind of question where he is. And he has one more year guaranteed in this contract. Could he move off from after this year? Possibly, possibly not. But they have that option.
And there should be a healthy Marshawn Lloyd behind him now, which we all kind of liked him coming into the draft process last year. He was injured all last year. If Marshawn Lloyd is healthy, he's probably the better backup on that squad. Does he eat into the Jacobs production at all? That remains to be seen. But yeah, Jacobs he still has a 2-year window, but he's got a lot of miles on the years that he does have because he's seen so many touches.
100%. Moving to wide receivers quickly, we have a group kind of in that flex tier to maybe their wide receiver 3, especially if you're loaded at running back, right? Which is a good way to operate, have some running backs in your flex spots as a contender. Chase, I'm actually going to go right back to you there. We're between Mike Evans, who is wide receiver 34, ranked 96. We have Jeudy, pretty much right behind him at wide receiver 36, ranked 98. And then a few spots later, just wide receiver 38, but a good 10 players later, rank 108. We have Davante Adams. So, Chase, between that group at cost, how are you ordering those 3?
I need a drink for this one. This is a great question. This is rough because if you are a contender, you're looking at what these 3 guys either gave you last year or can give you, and it's really tough to say that you want to sell necessarily any of them, but you've also got at least a couple of guys in Evans and Adams that are aging out pretty quick here. Mike Evans, phenomenal year last year, one of his best years that he's had in terms of fantasy production. It took him kind of a schemed up, gimmicked couple of plays in his last game there to get himself over that 1,000-yard mark that we always talk about. Oh, Mike Evans is a lock for 1,000 yards. Even with some injuries last year, yeah, he got his 1,000. But again, we saw the injuries happen last season. Mike Evans is a guy that, obviously Baker Mayfield's going to throw the ball to him. I don't care that Liam Cohen's gone. I don't care that, that the offense might change a little bit. Mike Evans is a guy that Baker Mayfield feels comfortable throwing to, and he is going to throw him the football. But 14 games last season. 2023, he played all 17. The year before that, though, 15 games, missed a couple of games. He's getting to the point where we might see him start to miss a couple of games due to that age every single season. I'm not crazy about the idea of selling him off, especially if I'm a contender, but I think that you might be able to talk somebody into the idea that, hey, he had that year last year, 11 touchdowns, Baker's favorite target. Maybe you can get somebody to bite on that. So it's a hold, but sell if I get the right offer. Jeudy is one that I'm worried about in terms of his quarterback situation because the Cleveland Browns have 37 quarterbacks in that room, which means they don't actually have an NFL quarterback in that room. I like Joe Flacco. He's a good man. He's done a lot for that club. He's done a lot in his career. He's been around a long dang time. He is not anything that excites me in terms of what he's got to offer here at 40 plus years old. He might be the best option on that team for fantasy points throwing to these wide receivers, but I'm still not sure how much he's going to be able to deliver to Jeudy. Now that said, Jeudy was wide receiver 15 last year with some terrible quarterback play, with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, with a shell of Deshaun Watson. I'll just put it that way. I won't call him a name. I'll just call him Deshaun Watson because that's all you have to call him at this point in his life. With terrible quarterback play, Jeudy was wide receiver 15 overall last season. I'm inclined to hold him. I'm inclined to see what he can give me this season. He may be a sell later in the season, but I'm going to hold him because of his age, because I know that he's the alpha on that team right now. I'm inclined to hold him based on what he did last year. Davante Adams, I want to sell him because I think there is hype all over him right now. Yes, he still has something in the tank. He's playing with Matthew Stafford. He's playing across from Puka Nacua. He's not going to see double teams. He's going to see some open looks. He's going to get the ball thrown to him with Matthew Stafford. But I think that there is a lot of hype around him right now going to Los Angeles, going to play with Matthew Stafford. I think that you can kind of maximize your value on him right now, and he is aging out quickly. So Davante Adams is definitely going to be a sell for me, even if I'm a contender, because I think I can get either a running back piece that can help me right now, or I think I can maybe recoup some of the draft capital that I've spent to get myself to contender status by selling off Davante Adams. So I'm going to hold to sell Evans. I am going to hold or buy Jeudy, and I'm going to definitely sell Adams.
All right, Chris, where are you at with this group?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit reversed from Chase. I'm going to buy Mike Evans. I'm going to sell Jeudy, and I'm going to hold Davante Adams. For me, it's real simple. Chase, talk about Mike Evans. He still went over 1,000 yards. He was banged up most of the season. He still had 11 touchdowns. Jeudy had 4 touchdowns last year. Jeudy finished, he finished receiver 15. How many weeks did he finish receiver 15 or better when it wasn't the quarterback, it was a different quarterback, I should say, under the center? It was Jameis or feast or famine. That was it. When Jameis wasn't the quarterback, Jeudy wasn't producing. That last week, if you had Jeudy in your lineup in the playoffs, you got screwed. And I think that while I like the idea of him being a guy that he's going to be target machine in a sense, I think what you're getting is a guy who kind of, you don't really understand the touchdown value. The quarterback questions, as Chase alluded to, is definitely going to be a concern. This is going to probably be a run-first team, and a guy that I think that we all were all high on coming out of the draft, but we've kind of been waiting for it to kind of boom. And even last year, while it was a better year, it wasn't necessarily the boom I expected in a sense. And I don't know if Jeudy's going to be quite what I hoped he was going to be. So I think this could be a guy that, I'm not eager to sell, but is definitely the guy on this list I'm going to sell. Because for me, Davante Adams is the other guy where, yes, he's aging out, but we've seen that second receiver for the Rams be able to eat. Now, I know Al Robinson kind of fell off the cliff, but what we usually see that second receiver do is score touchdowns. Puka Nacua has been receiver 1 for that team for the last couple of years. Puka doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. That second receiver, whether it's Denard Robinson, whether it was Cooper Kupp, whoever the hell they stuck out there, those are the kind of guys they wind up looking for in the red zone. But Davante Adams showed me last year that he's not completely cooked either. He can still break tackles. He can still make things happen close to the thing. And I think the fact that Sean McVay went out and recruited him, I think there's a plan in place. And one thing I trust with Matthew Stafford, if he has a receiver who's good and get open, he's going to target him the ball. And I think Davante Adams shown you everywhere he's gone, he's always the guy that kind of commands targets. I think that's where he's going to kind of be able to have one last hurrah. I want to have him as a hold for me because I'm not going to sell him, on thinking people are going to buy him on decline, and a guy I still think has potential to have double-digit touchdowns at worst. So the yards might not be what you're hoping for, but I think the floor is there, and the ceiling could be there as well. Versus, like I said, at Jeudy, you got kind of the best you could, and you got 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, no, I lean towards the Davante side. We'll get into that in a minute, but Dan, I want to kick it to you first.
All right, well, we got Evans. He's a hold. Jeudy's a sell, and Adams is my buy. Adams is a buy for a lot of reasons that Chris just listed out right there. First of all, he's valued least out of the 3 receivers that we're talking about. He's a wide receiver 4 in Dynasty. That makes him pretty cheap to be able to obtain, and Chris, you nailed it on the head. This is an offense that's had top 12 receivers, 2 top 12 receivers pretty consistently when they have those go-to options. And despite all the volatility and everything that was crazy in New York, Adams is still the wide receiver 14 last year. I will take my odds with him at least for one more season with how cheaply I can buy him. Jeudy, you're a sell. He had a breakout season finally midway through his career, and it took a quarterback with a particular set of skills to pull that off, and then Jameis Winston. All right, unless Joe Flacco was able to reconjure the magic he had from a few years ago with Cleveland, what happens if Joe Flacco is the Flacco we saw last year with the Colts? This would get really bad really fast in Cleveland for any pass catcher involved. And if you can sell Jeudy based on his past production from last season, I'm selling it. Right now, he's in the same range as guys like Ricky Pearsall and second-round rookie picks. I'll take any of that over Jerry Jeudy right now. Mike Evans, I'm holding him. Yes, he's 32. He's past that age prime, so you're not going to be able to sell him for what you would want to, but I don't want to. If I'm a contender right now, Evans is a wide receiver too, at least, period. If he gets you a couple pop touchdowns, he can still be a top 12 guy even at his age in that offense with the way they utilize him. So I'm just going to ride out Evans until the grave. He's one of those players in that situation where he's hit that spot. I'm not moving off of him there either, so he's a hold for me.
I'm pretty close to you. My difference is I'm going to ever so slightly, take Evans over Adams. And my reason being is I think in terms of an NFL wide receiver, I think it's Mike Evans by a mile. I love what Davante Adams, like his role can be, and I think he can do what Cooper Kupp was before he was hurt the last year or two. Not prime Cooper Kupp, get out of the way, but I mean, even last season, earlier in the season when Cooper Kupp was healthy, like that version of it where we're getting that 10 to 12 targets still, and he's being that volume hog and working with Puka, which we saw for 6 weeks last season, and then it kind of poof. I think Davante Adams can do that real well. So I'm really excited about him. But again, for Mike Evans, he was at 2.3 yards per route run over the course of the season last season. Mike Evans had, I think in terms of his on-field product, and the injuries are, I mean, look, you're going to have some injuries for big receivers as they get older, but I mean, there's a real argument to be made as an on-field product when healthy that was the best Davante Adams has been in a decade. Genuinely. Or Mike Evans, excuse me. He just had a really strong season. And coming off of that, I'm willing to have him as my buy, whereas Davante Adams was still a really good player, by the way, especially once he got to the Jets. I'm going to go him second, just ever so slightly. And then for me, Jeudy is the sell. Just the quarterback room and him being someone who has been a really good route runner. I think at times overrated, but a really good route runner throughout his career. But I think his overall production has never been so great until this past season, and that felt to me a little bit volume and a little bit necessity based rather than him really coming to his own. Not that he's a bad receiver, but I don't know that he's an elite wide receiver one that maybe the stats might have indicated. So that would be my ranking of the three, as Evans is the buy, the hold being Adams, and the sell being Jeudy. But Dan, I'm gonna kick it to you to wrap us up.
Well, Jeudy, you are the weakest link. Goodbye. All right. So with that, next week, we're going to be talking about if you're a rebuilder, would you buy, sell, or hold certain players in the same tier, again, by position. So make sure you tune in for that. You can always check us out on your favorite podcast app on Operation Domination Football, wherever you listen to podcasts, or follow us on YouTube at FF Advice Net. You can always catch us there or any other of the great Fantasy Football Advice Network shows. You guys be good. We'll see you next week. Hey there, I want to thank you for watching Operation Domination today. And if you're enjoying the show, there are some ways you can help support us. You can go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination and leave us a 5-star review. And you can do this on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page when you go to @FF Advice Network. This completely helps out the show be able to grow, and also leave us comments to let us know how we can curtail the show to you, because you are the most important member of the show. So again, go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination to leave a 5-star review and leave a comment wherever you listen or watch the show, and we'll help better serve you.